Hey everybody, it's Vanessa, the Crafty Gemini. Welcome to episode number 198 of WIP Wednesday, where we're going to be playing with some 5" by 5" square pieces of fabric today and my handy dandy Crafty Gemini 5" slicer. So, a couple things. I actually thought about doing this episode here today because I got an email from a customer who was trying to figure out how to make the sliced block that we use in the 10" slicer, or that we make with the 10" slicer, how to do it with the 5" slicer. She was basically trying to do the same thing that she was doing with the bigger ruler, and it wasn't turning out. And so, I explained it to her and I sent her some pictures of how to do it. And then I thought, you know what? I don't think I have a video for this yet. So I thought we would do that today on WIP Wednesday. So real quick before I get started, let's go ahead and jump into the chat just to make sure that everybody can see me and hear me first and foremost. Do you want me to unplug this one and try it, or you're gonna? It's not pulling up, huh? I'll try it out. Always something with these. We'll see when it comes in. All right, let me look into the chat and see who is tuning in today. Hey, Margie, thanks for tuning in. Hey, Gloria. She says, hello, I have the 5" slicer. Awesome, then this video is gonna come in handy for you today. Hi, Heather, thanks for tuning in. Hey, Marcia. We got Jan in the house from Nevada. Awesome. Hey, Miss Deborah. Hi, Lynette and Sylvia. All right, good. Y'all can see me and hear me, but my other camera is not pulling up. So hold on. See if it'll pull up there. It's always something. And I don't have a memory card in it, so it should be working fine. But you know how technology is, y'all. All right. Hi, Evelyn, tuning in from Puerto Rico. Awesome. Welcome, welcome. Okay, let's see if we can get a camera going here, because then I want to, we'll just leave it on the one camera so that y'all can see my demo and we can work here on the work table. Nope. Leave that one and let me turn off the camera off and then back on and see. It won't even show up there. Oh dear. Let's see if we can get it to pull up, and then we'll just do the one camera, y'all. Nope. Do you want to put this camera, see if it'll plug up to the front and take off this one? As long as I can get one camera here, then we can get started. But if y'all have 5" by 5" square pieces of fabric, this is the ruler that you're going to want to take out. If you're trying to put together maybe like a quickie, just a quick make project, it's a little bit, I consider it a little bit tough just because it's so small. So it's like a lot of, cutting and piecing. And even as you're putting the blocks together, you're just like, this thing is not getting any bigger. And it just stays kind of small. So let's see. Nothing. So let me think how I want to do this. And this camera's all the way over there. I guess I can pull this one over here. We'll just have to unplug it so that I can move it. And all right, go for it. Let's see. Heather said, by 10" ruler, those are all going to be good options for you to cut down your own yard. Okay, well, let me see something over here. Okay. Okay, well, maybe something went wrong with that cord. I don't know. All right. Let's see. And the lighting. So unplug this one because I'll have to move the tripod and bring it over here. Yep, just pull the cord right there.
Just one over there?
Yep. Because the clip only, you know, the different tripods are for different cameras. Here, just throw it over. I need the other cord. Or not, just forget it. Let me do this one in here. It doesn't matter. Okay. Let me, 1 second, y'all. I'm just getting it all set up. Can they hear me? Oh. They can? Okay. Yeah, I'm just trying to get this lens set up here so at least I can zoom in and out and they can see the thing. And then I'll just hike this up higher. All right, that'll work for now, I guess. Hold on. I just don't want to knock this one down either because this tripod is more lightweight than the other one. Okay. One more leg to adjust. They don't reach to here? That's fine. Okay, I think that might work. Let me not use the rotary cutter and chop this. Okay. Phew! All right, we'll try that. Okay, y'all won't see my face, but at least you'll see what I'm doing. Let me see if that will stay put here. Okay. All right, great. Okay, good. Thank you, Heather, for letting me know that you could hear me but not see me. So hopefully now y'all can see me and hear me. Yes? Let's do it. All right, so I'm gonna be using my 5-inch slicer today, and this is the little guy. These are rulers that I designed over a decade ago, designed really to be used with pre-cut fabric. So 5-inch by 5-inch squares and 10-inch by 10-inch squares. This is a 10-inch slicer. Back in the days, that was what, 11 years ago, there was a lot of us were just collecting these, you know, charm packs like this and the layer cakes and stuff. And it was, I was hearing, obviously from my quilt club members and from my students, hey, do you have a design that we could do with this? I have so many of these pre-cut stacks in my stash and I don't know what to do with it. Because what happens is if you have a lot of pre-cuts like this and one day, say in a weekend or something, you have time off and you want to work on a quilt, what people were finding is that a lot of the designs online that they could make with the pre-cuts would require 1 or 2 of these stacks, but then it would say 2.5 yards of a solid for the background or an extra 3 yards of background fabric. And so people didn't have this amount of yardage in their stash. And so they were like, what can I make with just the pre-cuts? You know what I mean? Without necessarily having to have a bunch of background fabric. Now, this is a super cute. Say what? Okay, well, I'll try not to. You know why, too, because this is a different lens. But we'll try it. Actually, hold on. Let me see if that'll work. I don't know what's going on. There we go. All right, so this is Wyndham Fabrics. This collection is called Catterday, and it's by Felice Regina. I love it. Super cute. We used this quite a bit back in the days when it first came out. I think I had a yardage of it in my shop, too, in my brick and mortar store when I used to have it. So there it's not lagging, but the lighting is a little bit off, but I can't really adjust it too much on that setting. But anyway, so these were 5-inch by 5-inch squares, and we were trying to come up with different quilt designs that could give us some really good visual interest, some contrast. And one of the things that these pre-cut stacks really help with is that all the colors and the prints, there's usually a good distribution of small prints, medium size, large scale prints. And so you could use all of that without having to do the color matching, finding different prints that went together and all that kind of stuff. So that's why I came up with these rulers. They've been really popular for, like I said, over a decade, and you can only buy them from us these days. So I put the link in the description box below. I want to show y'all how to make the sliced block, which is this guy, with the little one, okay? So those of you that maybe are familiar with the 10-inch slicer, you know how we can make a similar looking block with the big ruler using the 10-inch by 10-inch squares. I have several, and I also included links in the description box where you can find all the different free tutorials that we have on how to use the different rulers, okay? So that sliced block like this from 10-inch squares is basically the easiest, most straightforward design that you can make with the 10-inch slicer. So I want to show y'all how you can get something similar, these kind of blocks, made from 5-inch by 5-inch squares, okay? So it's just, I mean, it's not a ton of stuff going on. I'm cutting them the same way. So the little slashes, the little sliced pieces are all facing in the same direction. You can imagine that if you had a collection like this of 5-inch by 5-inch squares, you could have a ton of variety, right? And make a whole little quilt just with these guys. Now, keep in mind that we're cutting into the pieces, we're cutting into squares, and then we're also eating up fabric because we have 1/4-inch seam allowances, okay? So I'm gonna show you how we can do this with the little guy, okay? And I have pre-cut here some, let me see what colors would show up good on here. Some 5-inch by 5-inch squares that I just cut from yardage. Let me see if this shows up better than that, because that aqua kind of goes with the, I'll do that. With the blue from there. Okay, so the way that this little ruler works, there's different ways that we orient it and use it. It's both a little ruler. Obviously, you're not going to really use it to be cutting and trimming down your patchwork pieces and all this kind of stuff, but we use it as a ruler and a template. And I say ruler and template for both of them because they have both dimensions and 1/4-inch increments that you could use it to do a quick measure. You have 190-degree angle corner on it, so if you needed to trim up your blocks, you could use that 90-degree corner to trim things up. They do have my signature, I would say, dashed lines on the rulers. All my rulers have these dashed lines. This is the 10-inch slicer, and this is the 5-inch by 10-inch ruler. The lines are really fine, and they're dashed, okay, so that you could see the edge of your fabric through there. And I think if you're a quilter who cuts a lot of patchwork, you know what I'm talking about, where sometimes we use rulers that just have solid lines on them and the lines are quite chunky and it doesn't really allow you to see the fabric edge right in between there, okay? These lines are so fine and dashed that you can really scoot it up and get it to be perfectly in line with your fabric edge before you are trimming or cutting or doing whatever, right? So I'm a big fan of accuracy, and if you are too, I think you'll appreciate that. Now, it's a template because we use it for this asymmetrical shape to cut out like we would a template. If you're used to cutting out, let me think, like with the clammy ruler or specialty templates for doing curved piecing and things like that, you're familiar with acrylic templates, okay? So that's how we're going to use it here today. So this is how this would work to do a little block like this. Let me pull this guy up, okay? You take two 5-inch by 5-inch squares. And the idea of using these two is that I would want to swap the strip that I cut from this yellow, I put it to the black and white. And the strip that I cut from the black and white, I'm putting it to the yellow. So we're getting visual interest here. We're getting contrast if you're using contrasting colors and fabrics, and you're using up all the fabric. Does that make sense? So that's kind of how I designed it, so that we wouldn't have a ton of waste, because I wouldn't want to cut into it, lose some fabric, and then have to cut strips out from something else, you know, and put it in here. We are cutting from each of the two 5-inch by 5-inch squares, and we're basically playing a swapping game with the little strips. Here you're only seeing two, but if you were to do something like this, right, from a whole pre-cut stack, then you can swap the little strips that every single square is going to give you, because you're cutting them the same way, okay, out of each square. You could play around with those different little strips and put them with whatever fabric you wanted to get some really good visual interest and kind of sprinkle all the colors and the prints around, okay? And because you would be using something like this from a collection that you know all the colors in here, I mean, just looking at the end of this here, you can see that all the colors match. So then you could just swap the little strips based on how you want it to look, what looks good to your eyes. If you have too much of the pink or purple on one kind of side of the quilt design, you can swap them over the other way and things like that. So you just play around, okay? All right. Oh, Debbie says she's made several of the slice blocks in both sizes. Awesome. Okay, so here we go. This is what we're going to get out of these two, okay? And let me see if this is going to lag if I swap it to here, because I would like to give y'all a little bit more light. I feel like it's kind of dark. Oh, it's a little bit laggy. It is when I put it on manual. Okay, well, we're just going to play with this then. Give me a second. I want to see if I can, Nope, I guess that's it. Okay. Is that too dark for y'all, or can you all see it? What do y'all think? It's not as bad? Okay, give me 1 second. Oh, it's a little dark. Let me just put this light on real quick and see if this will help. Give me 1 second. Do you see a difference there? I think I have both lights on. Yeah? Okay, we'll do it like that. Just so it's a little bit brighter. A little bit. Okay. All right, so we're gonna get 2 blocks like this, but with these 2 fabrics, okay? All right, thanks, Heather. Okay, so here we go. I'm going to do one at a time just so that you can see exactly how we do this. We do use a rotary cutter, and it is helpful to have a rotating cutting mat, but you don't have to have it, especially with the smaller size. So I can kind of show you both, I guess. If you don't have a rotating mat, I'll show you how you would do it. So to get this strip here, and this is something that you can play around with, okay? I'm going to show you how I do it to get this narrow strip. But if you want this narrow of a strip in there, you have to be really precise with those seam allowances. I use scant 1/4 inch seam allowances. If you're someone who tends to sew like a chunky 1/4 inch, you're going to have trouble, because this strip here is going to be basically non-existent if you go too big on the seam allowances, okay? So I'll show you. And we can do a couple different ones just to kind of play around with it so you can know what you need to do at home. Okay, so I am going to, I'm going to try and use these squares here on the cutting mat. Normally I wouldn't, but I'll just, so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm going to take my ruler, and this is the text. It sits like this, like right side up. But because we're using it as a template, we're going to use it both ways, or you can, you know, depending on the quilt that you're doing. So this one, I'm going to flip it. I want to have that 90-degree angle corner to the left. And I'm going to position this not here. Okay, if you were making that little peak block that we do, I have another video tutorial on how to make a block that has a triangle cut out, and you basically swap the center triangles. That's one way that you would use it like this, you know. So I do have videos, and I included the links in the description on different ways that you can use the block. For this guy, we're going to offset this and slide it over by 1/2 inch. Okay, it's tricky for y'all to see because each square here is 1 inch. So I'm basically aligning it with the halfway point. Another thing you can do is just take a ruler and put a ruler there, and that's 1/2 inch, okay? You see how I have 1/2 inch of this ruler on there, and then bump up this guy. Okay, you can get rid of this because the part that we're going to use to cut is this asymmetrical angle. So I set it over 1/2 inch, and then I'm cutting. Okay, so I used it as a template, but I offset it by 1/2 inch. I need to do the same thing on this side, right? I can't just flip this over because look, I need it to be going in the same direction so that I can cut this little strip that's going in that direction. So what you're gonna do is turn it, okay? And you're gonna do the same exact thing. So the template itself needs to be oriented the same way as it was. That 90-degree corner is to my left, and I'm gonna offset it by 1/2 inch. So again, you can measure. I'm measuring 1/2 inch, then I'll bump this guy up, hold it there, and slice. Okay, so this is what you're doing. And you would do all your blocks like this. And I'm cutting them, this is a solid, but I'm cutting them pretty side facing up, okay? So let's do, whoops, I was gonna do this one. Let's do the same thing again. And I kind of like this idea of using the ruler. That way it's even more precise. If you have a cutting mat like I have down here that has little dots at the 1/4 inch increments, you can line it up with those dots. Obviously, it's not going to be as precise as this, but again, I'm setting that 90-degree angle corner on the left side, and it's 1/2 inch away from the edge of the fabric, but make sure that it's lined up at the bottom and at the top. We can hold it and cut. If you don't have a rotating cutting mat, you would make this first cut, and then all you would do is just turn it around. Okay? This part doesn't matter anymore. I just turn it around with it so that it can still be in position and you don't mistakenly flip this and do it a different way. If it's like this, you can visually see like, oh, okay, I'm gonna be cutting in the right direction because the slants are going the same way, versus mistakenly swapping it or doing something like that. And then you're like, wait a minute, this is not giving me the strip that I need here. So taking that piece along with you is a good reminder visually that, you know, you're doing either the right thing or the wrong thing. And look at me, I'm almost doing the wrong thing. Flip it over, set it, offset it 1/2 inch away, and then we're cutting. Okay, and then once you have, I mean, if you're using a stack like this or 2 stacks like this, whatever, or you've pre-cut your own 5-inch squares, a good thing to do too is when you're working on bigger projects, if you have like good sized chunks, is just subcut them down and set aside 5-inch squares. When you have a good stack, you know, it could be from different fabrics, different colors, across different projects, then you can go in and cut them up and make a really scrappy quilt, okay? So once you have all your squares cut like this, pretty sides facing up so they're all going the same way, then you would just play a swapping game with these strips, okay? Notice the strip is not very wide, and I think visually, until you sew a lot of patchwork pieces, it's easy to think that the block is gonna look like that. But you have to account for how much you're gonna eat up on each side in that seam allowance, okay? So that's why I'm saying this wide of a strip cut yields you just about 1/4 inch strip going across this way. Okay, so we're gonna piece these together, and then let's come back here and I'm gonna cut some with a slightly different offset just so that you visually can see what you would get if you did that. Okay, thank you, Betty, I appreciate that. All right, so a couple of options for piecing. You can just flip the strip over, pretty sides touching. Okay, here's the trick for this, because a lot of times people don't do this part, and then what happens is they end up with a similar looking block, but then they're so off at the top and bottom that they have to cut off, right, to come up with a new dimension for the rectangular little patchwork block, and then you end up wasting more fabric because you're trimming them down smaller so that they're even across the top. So if you don't want to have to do that, and you want to end up with something that finishes pretty even on both ends, like all of these guys, I didn't really have to trim them. You then only end up having to trim off like little dog ears. But you're preserving the full height of the block if, and only if, you do this, okay? So when you put the strip pretty side to pretty side, we flip the strip over onto this edge. I am not aligning them tip to tip like this. That's the mistake. People will do that. Oh, it's kind of dark like that. Let me see if I can show you like this. Hold on. Because this lens doesn't work like my other one. But you do not match it tip to tip. This will for sure guarantee you an offset strip. Does that make sense? Not like that. Let me show you. You're going to drag it up so that the tip of the strip is a scant 1/4 inch away from where the fabric is underneath. So it's sticking up. Do you see that beyond this edge here? Like that. And so then what happens on the bottom edge is that it is offset. From here to here is that scant 1/4 inch, and it looks like it's short. So you're kind of sliding it up this way. This has to do with the angle of the strip, that after we piece it and we press it back, it will be in line. Okay, so you have to remember to do that. Otherwise, you're going to be trimming a ton, and we don't want to have to trim a ton. 1, because we want to preserve our fabric, right? And 2, because ain't nobody got time for that. All right, so I'm gonna put another little pin down here, like that. So you could put pins, okay? Another option would be to flip it here and grab whatever your favorite basting glue is. I'm just gonna use the Elmer's washable. Sometimes I hesitate talking about this because on this one, I don't have the little super extra fine tip, and you absolutely have to remember to not put much at all. And by much, it's like, I don't even want to see white on here in terms of the glue. Like, you should not even be able to see it. So it's just a matter of dabbing. And I'm only doing like 5 or 6 dots across the whole thing. You probably can't even see it, and that should tell you that's how much or how little glue you need there, okay? Then you can take your strip, again, offsetting it at the top by that scant 1/4 inch, offsetting it at the bottom. by that scant 1/4 inch and making sure that the edges align. Before I would sew that one, I would absolutely make sure, actually, why am I grabbing that? I have a whole little ironing mat under here. I forget. So you would, if you used a liquid glue, make sure that you just set it with a hot, dry iron. You don't want to blast steam at this because the steam is adding moisture and then it's not going to dry the liquid glue, okay? It just a nice hot iron. Thank you, Patricia. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Apologies for the technical issues and the lighting, y'all, but hopefully you can see this, especially those of you that already have the 5-inch slicer and maybe have had it for 10 years in a drawer somewhere. This is a great little project, so hopefully you'll give it a go. So there it is. It's sticking up by that scant 1/4 inch, and so it's been slid up by that scant 1/4 inch, all right? So pins or basting glue, either option is a good one. Let's go ahead and stitch this up. And so we've been talking about scant 1/4 inch. For those that are not quilters, scant 1/4 inch just means a couple of threads of the fabric, like when you look at the little threads that make up the fabric, a couple of threads narrower, skinnier, or less than a 1/4 inch. That's what you want, because it ends up being a true 1/4 inch after you account for the thickness of the thread in the stitching, okay, and the folding of the fabric back. So you can't start off with a 1/4 inch. It's going to end up being way chunkier if you do that, okay? I really wish that I could adjust this thing. It's driving me nuts. Hold on. She said this is a different model camera too. And this is the one that makes it glitchy, right?
What's that? The camera?
It makes it lag a little bit, you see? When I switch it to manual. Whatever. Let's try it like this and hopefully y'all can see it, you know, what I'm trying to do a little bit brighter. Okay. So let's go ahead and stitch this guy up first. Well, let me talk a little bit about the settings on the machine. My machine defaults to the center needle position at 3.5. This means right here when the stitch width is on when I've selected a straight stitch and the stitch width is at 3.5 on my machine, that means the needle is smack dab in the center of my presser foot, okay? So I'm going to be sewing a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance, which means instead of changing out my foot, what I like to do on this machine is just move the needle over to the right so that it is set at a scant 1/4 inch from the edge of my presser foot, and that way we just use the presser foot as our guide, okay? So that's my plan. So for me, I'm going to bump this guy up to 5.5. Normally, y'all see me do like 5.0. That's like a scant 1/4 inch for other projects, you know? For this, especially because I'm working with such a skinny strip here, I want to go like one more thread skinnier, okay? It's like 1 millimeter. Well, I guess it's 0.5 millimeters, which is barely anything. You can't really tell the difference, but 0.5 millimeters, okay, narrower than a 1/4 inch. So that's what we're going to do. So we're going to go here, and I'm starting with the needle in my project. And the reason I sunk the needle down is to see if it's going in right where I want it to. And it should be, I'm going to bring it back up, right at the intersection from where this little piece of fabric sticks out that we said it was going to be up that scant 1/4 inch from there. That's exactly where the needle should be inserted. And so that tells me I know what I'm doing. I put it in the right place. And if I start from there, chances are that I'll be able to sew a consistent scant 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Okay. I'm not even going to back stitch here. My stitch is set in the length to 2 millimeters. That's really small because this is a construction stitch. I'm just going to go with it. And so all I'm doing is watching my fabric and the edge of my presser foot. So when we're coming off here, remember I have a little bit of offset here too. Let me see if y'all can see that. Yeah, I think there you can see it. You see where the pink fabric sticks out? If I maintain this, I should exit right there, right where the yellow fabric overlaps the pink, and that is my scant 1/4 inch over from this edge, okay? So that little offset that we had, those kind of dog ears that we kind of have poking out, that is gonna be your guide to know if you're inserting and exiting your needle in the correct spot, okay? And this looks pretty good to me. This would actually be a really cute pastel quilt, okay? So that's one. Let's go ahead and do the other one with the glue basted, or that we glue basted together. I did go ahead and dry the glue, right? I literally just thought to myself, let me make sure that glue is dry. But I remember using my iron to press it. Make sure that that is dried, okay? And then we're gonna do the same exact thing. I insert here. And you could do one back stitch. If you have a machine that like you can tap a button and it just goes back one, that's probably the easiest way. The reason I'm not doing it here is one, like I said, the stitch length is super tight and small. Two, I'm not really gonna be yanking on that strip, so I know it's gonna stay put. And three, I don't want to encourage you to do these back stitches where a lot of times beginners are like, well, she said to back stitch, and you back stitch like 3, 4, 5 stitches and then you come back over. It just ends up being way too much thread bulk there. Again, I should be exiting right here, okay? All right, I'm gonna switch it back because I'm gonna be moving my hands and pointing now, so I want y'all to be able to see exactly what's what. Okay. So, can we see how narrow that stitching is there? Same on here. But we started here and exited right at that overlap. This is a really good one. The thread is white, so it's tricky to see, but I think here, hold on. There we go. Do you see that exactly where I exited? That is exactly where y'all need to be exiting out. That's my scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And because I'm exiting here, you're gonna see how well it's gonna finish in line once we press it this way. I mean, look, just by holding it there, you can see. So the angle of that strip makes up for that. Do you see that? Once the strip gets pressed back this way, look at that, it's right in line. Okay, so I'm glad that y'all got to see that. Let me go ahead and press this right quick. And then you would do that to all your blocks. You can do them kind of assembly line style and then go in, you know, and attach the second chunk of the fabric. Now, I'll share something else with you here. This is how I like to do it. I'm gonna turn it. Oof, that looks horrible. I really do not like those colors. That yellow is looking like brown. Maybe this will help. Okay, good. Let's get a little more contrast there so y'all can see what I'm doing. So because this piece of fabric is bigger than this one, I like to, and mind you, I forgot to mention this, but I starch all my fabric before I cut out these patchwork pieces. Because we're cutting stuff on the slightly biased grain line here, without starch, and if you're handling it a little bit too rough, you're gonna stretch that strip out all over the place, and you don't want that. But because it's starched, it's pretty crisp and it stays put. So I can pull this strip back. Notice what I'm doing with the iron. I'm pulling the edge of the iron over all the way into where the stitching is here, and I'm just gonna swipe across and hold. Then I take my clapper, and my iron is dirty. I can tell because I just swiped. Oh, it's just a little something on there, okay? And there it is. So can you see we have a little bit of a dog ear there that gets trimmed, but I don't have to trim anything away from here because this strip is right in line with my fabric. Same thing at the top, look at that. All right, so the trick for that is in that offset, okay? So now, let me see. Thank you, Lynette. She says, don't forget to thumbs up the video. Let's see real quick. Heather says, to mix up the colors, would you just do a light and a dark from a charm pack? Yes, so you can do that. Now, sometimes, you know, with so many charm packs and things like that on the market, there were different collections. Oops, there were different collections. That's where the gunk is coming from, the lint that's inside of this open space here in the iron. I was wondering, I was like, what is this fluff? But lint. When you deal with cotton, you're gonna have a lot of lint everywhere. But, so Heather's asking about matching up lights to darks. You can. What I was saying is that there are so many different combinations and fabric collections that they're putting into these pre-cuts these days that sometimes the full stack doesn't even have a lot of contrast. Sometimes they, or at least back in the days, I remember they used to sell like more monochromatic stacks, okay? Where all of them would be a certain kind. like certain tones or maybe just two colors. Some of them would be ombre. I have a quilt with this design, the sliced quilt made out of the 10-inch slicer with the big 10-inch squares. That's all whites, creams, and blacks. So it's black, like a black and white quilt version. So if you had a pack like that, you could absolutely do that. Something else that you can do if you're going for a scrappy look, Heather, if it's maybe a mix or you had some left over from these different charm packs or you're cutting your own yardage, check out what you can do here too. We started off with these guys, which was one yellow square and one pink, right? So we know, because I swapped the little strips, that I'm going to end up going like this. But if I cut and prepped all, like a bunch of 5-inch squares the same way that I swapped the strips, I could also go in and swap this piece, right? Because if you cut all your squares the exact same way, you're gonna have the exact same 3 pieces from as many squares as you cut. So we've done quilts like that too, and a lot of my students have, where instead of keeping the same fabric for the 2 background pieces of the sliced quilt, they will come in here with an additional fabric. Let me see if I have one. I don't have a loose one because we sewed them. But say I came in here and used the black and white little chunk. Then you would have blocks that feature 3 different fabrics. And so the little swapping game can be done with as many of the squares as you cut up. Does that make sense? So it would look like this. And so then you're getting even more visual interest, contrast, depending on whatever you're doing, okay? To get a quilt still made up with just 5-inch squares. But it looks a lot better than just like, you know how we do. We're just like, oh, I don't have time. I'm just gonna cut up all these 5-inch squares and I'm just gonna sew the squares together. Like, yeah, that's cute, but we could do a little bit more by using one simple ruler and a template and piecing it together to make it look like it took a lot more work than it really did, okay? So this is this. Let's go ahead and finish these blocks. You would do the same thing. Remember, put it the way that it's going to look together once it's done. Then you would flip it pretty side to pretty side, and don't forget to offset. And you might be thinking, oh my gosh, that's too much work. But trust me, once you start doing it quick, it's not much time at all. As a matter of fact, if your fabric is starched, I think you could even do this like this and just do 1 pin in each and then just keep a whole stack going. And then and then take them all to the sewing machine to piece. I see Heather saying that sounds like chaos, but maybe it will look cool. I'm trying this afternoon. Oh, it's gonna look so cool. It's a lot going on, you know? But if you start off already with a fabric combo that you like, you know, or a stack that matches, obviously that was from the same collection, then it'll all go together. It'll be no problem at all. Okay? So there's my other pin. Let's go ahead and stitch these guys up. Let me see. Dorothy says, so if you also wanted to use a 10-inch slicer, would you still offset by the 1/2 inch? No. So great question. The 10-inch slicer, and you'll see the video for it. When you get your 10-inch slicer, if you order one, they come wrapped and there is a sticker on it that has a web link there for you to go to. It's basically craftygemini.com/10-inch slicer. If you go to that page, you'll see all the tutorials. And so I have a full video step-by-step on how to make the sliced quilt with the 10-inch slicer. Because the 10-inch slicer is so much bigger proportionally from a 10-inch square than this guy is for a 5-inch square, you use the ruler just as a template is. There's no offsetting with this one. So you would just plop it flush with the edge of the 10-inch square block, boom, and cut this angle, and then turn it and do the same thing to the other side. So you don't have to offset. We're only offsetting here because we're trying to get a strip. And actually, I'll show you. Remind me that after I'm done stitching these guys up, I'm gonna cut one piece or one square how you would do it with the 10-inch slicer so I can show you what happens. That way, I end up wasting the fabric and you don't have to. But that's part of it, you know, keep some extra fabric on hand. That's like waste kind of scrap fabric. And that's when you can always experiment with different things, trying different angles, offsetting it by different amounts. All right, that's one. Let's do this other one. And I didn't even glue baste any of these, okay? I just put one pin and boom, let's go. And like I said, I don't backstitch, but you could do just, if you can do one backstitch, that's plenty. Just don't go overboard with like 2, 3, 4 backstitches. It's way too much thread bulk. And in case anybody's wondering, I do have a size 80-12 universal sewing machine needle in my machine, and I'm using 100% cotton thread, the Wonderful confetti thread. I think we have some white in the shop, and that's what I have on here, the Egyptian cotton. Okay, so remember that the links to both of these rulers, well, to all my rulers, are in the video description box below, as well as the links on where we have the video libraries with different ways to use the slicer rulers, okay? Couple questions. Do I have a design and dimensions for a quilt? Liz is asking. I don't have one for this one, because I'm just kind of showing you how to do the blocks here. And that's the beauty of it, I think, is that once you know how to do the block, then it's just a matter of how many squares do I need? How is it going to finish? And we're going to trim some of these up and measure them so that you know. Because I feel like a lot of times we're used to making quilt blocks that are just squares. These guys, because we started off with pre-cuts, they're not going to finish a square, right? Because we're keeping the height, the 5-inch this way, but we've eaten up 2 seam allowances. So there's no way that it could still finish 5 inches. So you have to account for that. So sometimes students, even with the 10-inch slicer, they'll say, well, what do I need to trim it down to? You don't have to trim it unless you want it to be a square. I'm fine using rectangles and just sewing them together. You know, there's still quilt blocks. They don't have to be a square. And that way you're using every bit of fabric. You don't have any waste. So I wouldn't trim them down because why? You know, most of the quilts we're making are usually going to be rectangular anyways. And so I want to keep my fabric in there without just cutting it just because, you know. So let's see. Kay says, what if you don't slide the side over 1/2 inch and just put on the edge? That's what we're going to do next. So I'll show you what happens. So anyway, I slid it there. I hit it with the clapper and boom. So now you see, okay, that in terms of the trimming, or when we talk about fabric waste, if you started off with 5-inch squares, then look. There's no trimming, right? There's nothing up here, and down here, all we have to cut is this. So that's really the use of these rulers, is how I designed them to be used. That's literally all the fabric waste I have. That, and let's do the other one. And that is the fabric waste I have from 4 5-inch by 5-inch squares. And I would say that that's pretty darn good in terms of non-wasteful designs, right? 4 little bitty dog ears, I'll take it. And so those are your 2 blocks. In terms of how long or how big they finish, 4 inches by 5 inches exactly. Okay? If you do that scant 1/4 inch like I did and you align everything so that you don't have to trim anything up. That's what mine finish at. 4 inches by 5 inches. So then you could do the math, okay? If I'm going to layer them up like this, if they're 4 inches right now, how big are they going to be when they're finished? Everybody know? 3.5, right? Because we're going to eat up 1/4 inch seam allowance from this side and from this side, whether this is going to get sewn to another block or it's going to get sewn into the binding. So our finished blocks will be 4 inches by 4.5. And with that math, then from there you can design whatever quilt you want. As long as you know those dimensions, you'll be able to know how many 5-inch by 5-inch squares you need to cut. Because remember, each one of these is being made from a 5-inch square. So you don't have to calculate 4, 5, 6 pieces that are going into the patchwork unit. Just calculate how many finished squares I need, and that's how many that's how many squares you need to cut. Okay, so pretty simple and pretty good on the waist, I would say. So that's that. Now, let's answer Kay's question. She's saying, if you use a 5-inch slicer, like we do the 10-inch slicer, and instead of offsetting it, we cut it right here. Okay? Here's what's going to happen. I cut. We're going to rotate. We're going to do the same thing to the other side. Do you still get a strip? Yes. Is it way bigger? Absolutely. So let's try it. And so that's what I was going to say, is that I offset it by 1/2 inch. If you want to get a nice narrow little strip like these guys, that's what you're going to do too, 1/2 inch. But you can use it however you want, right? You can offset it by a totally different amount. You can offset it by 3/4 and see what you get. You can offset it by, well, I would not recommend less than the 1/2 inch, because it literally is about 3/4 inch wide, and we eat up 1/2 inch, right? 1/4 and 1/4 on seam allowance, and so the strip that's left over exposed is that 1/4 inch. So if you go any bigger than that, you're not going to have much of a strip in there to sew, so it's not worth it. Okay, so then we swap. Okay, and this is fine too if you like that look, right? So that it's not just like a little accent strip. Instead, it's just going to be a bigger chunk. But remember to still offset. Okay. So let's stitch this up and see what we get. Grab a pin. All right. Okay. Let's do it. And see what we get. Scoop back over. All right. Oh! What happened to my thread? Looks like it hit something, a little bobble there. That needle or the stitch scooted over. All right, let's try it again. Maybe I inserted it like before the fabric was there. So that's another reason you want to sink that needle down so that it, you know, you're making sure you're going in the right spot. Okay. Let's put the other one in here. Is that right? Yeah. And so now you're going to get to see just how thick that little strip is, you know? And it just depends on what you want, what the look is that you're going for, and what the finished design is going to be. Which can also, you know, it can affect with the fabric that you're working with. You know, sometimes we use fabric prints that have like bigger designs. And so sometimes we don't want to cut them quite as small as these little guys, this little strip. Oops, let me put this on top, or rather the gray. And so what I was saying was if the image, like say one of these, for example, this cat fabric, if I end up with a strip this thin out of this fabric, I can guarantee you're not even going to be able to tell that they were cats, right? And so depending on what fabric you're using and how much of it you want to show or what design you're working on, you can decide how wide you want this strip to be so that you can display, you know, more or less of that fabric. If you have a fabric that you don't really love, but you're like, man, I have 3 yards of this junk. What am I going to do with it? If it's a color that you can find other stuff to blend with, you might want to do it like that so that it becomes a little strip. And there's plenty of times where I have done that with fabrics that I didn't love, but I put them in a way that I do like them in the finished, you know, project or result. So think about that for those of you that do have fabric in your stash that you don't really care for, but it's like a lot of yardage and you don't want to get rid of it fully. By the way, if you don't have a tailor's clapper, this is like a specialty one that I got from American Modern Vintage, but we do have the little small plain ones in our shop and they're on sale right now. So if you want to check those out, you can head on over to our website at craftygemini.com/shop and get yourself a clapper on sale. And you know, they don't often go on sale because they're, you know, they're handmade and they're quite heavy. So if you can save any money there, it's definitely going to be beneficial because, you know, the shipping on it is, it's not a pattern in an envelope. Let's say that. All right, so here we go. Here's the second one. I put the next side on there, offset it, grab a pin. And obviously you would do this assembly line style, you know, with whatever method you wanted to go with. You could glue baste a bunch and just have there a little iron where you're just like pressing them to set that glue in place. Right here, a little pin, and let's stitch these guys up just because I want to show you side by side what the difference is in the finished blocks. I mean, you got a lot of options, okay? Oh, can y'all see that? There we go. And so did y'all see too that when I'm pressing them, the strips don't move, the stitches don't come out even though I haven't backstitched? So it's also about knowing like when and where and what spots of a project you don't have to backstitch. One of the tips is if the stitch length is super short and tiny, Even if I wanted to take the stitching out, even with a seam ripper, it would be quite a bit of work because the stitches are so small. So if it's gonna be work for me to take out with a seam ripper, then you know for sure it's gonna hold at least until, you know, we stitch the block to another row, to another block, or to quilt it or whatever. It'll hold for now. Okay. So let's see what this guy looks like next to the other one. I was just looking at it like, wait, did I sew the right fabric? I did. And you can decide, you know, which way you want those seam allowances to be pressed. I just tend to do it away like that quick. But this one I would probably go like this and press the seam allowance in towards the yellow, just because this is hand-dyed fabric. It's pretty light and you can kind of see the seam allowance. So I rather the yellow be behind the yellow, and I would probably do it like this. Or press them both out to the pink. You know what I mean? Okay, and then let's do this one. Like that. Let's see how much waste we get out of these ones, guys. So see the difference between pressing them both to the yellow and pressing them both out towards this way. You could decide, you know, when you're working on your project, you can change it up however you want. Okay, so in terms of waste, we started off with 2 more 5-inch squares, and here's what we're trimming. 2 dog ears there, and no fabric here. This is just my thread tails. Not bad. And it's just more visually interesting than having 2 squares, you know? If you're short on time, that's one thing. But if you have the squares and you just want to do a little something else with the, you know, with the fabric, you could do that too, okay? And I've had customers and students that have done quilts like this, where they just, you know, instead of spending the time to offset it by the 1/2 inch, they just use it as they would the 10-inch slicer. So you can do either way, okay? But just for... I thought to do this demo because I had that one customer who wrote me to ask about how to get it to be like that, like narrower. You know what I mean? That looks more like the sliced, proportionally at least, the 10-inch slicer. So that's all it is. And then, of course, you can go, you can't really go narrower than this and make it worth your time to cut the strips, but you could go bigger than this and still smaller than this by offsetting it by less. You know what I mean? Instead of offsetting by 1/2 inch, you could offset by 1/4 inch on each side, and you'll end up with a strip that is not as chunky as this, but not as narrow as this. Okay? So let's see. Make sure I'm not missing anything here. Okay. So yeah. So that is, you know, just some ways that you could get the same kind of slashes going on with your 5-inch by 5-inch squares while using the 5-inch slicer ruler. I know a lot of you probably have this ruler. If you don't have it, these are great additions to your stash, because if you do have pre-cuts, let me grab the 10-inch. Oh, it's over here too. Of course I have a couple. If you have pre-cuts or you have yardage and leftover scraps that you can cut into pre-cuts, into 5-inch and 10-inch squares, I love just having these on hand because they're quick quilts that you can just throw together, and just using it, you know, as a ruler or as a template, however, depending on the design. So again, this is not the only design that you can make for quilt blocks and for quilts with my rulers. Make sure that you check the links I've included in the description box below, and the links that come on the rulers when you order them. There's a link on the label that comes in the packaging, so that you can go there and then scroll through different ways to use the rulers so that you can figure out what the next project is that you want to do. Okay, so that's going to be it for me today. Thank you all, everybody that's tuning in here live, for your patience with our technical issues. If you hung out till the end, thank you. I hope you'll give it a try. And if you don't yet have these rulers, make sure to go to craftygemini.com/shop. The link is in the caption and in the video description box, so you can grab your slicer rulers. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Thanks for your great questions. Enjoy the rest of your week, and I will see y'all in the next video. Bye.